Hey everybody, welcome to Breaking Audio. My name is Dave Parker. This video is the third and final part of a series on recycling drum loops in Ableton Live. So let's pick up where we left off. So in some of my earlier videos, we talked about some ways of dealing with drum loops that maybe give you more like, like typical results, like a drum beat you can really use and, it sounds nice or whatever. But with this video, we're going to get into a little bit more of the maybe mangling kind of, glitch sort of, the crazier side of things. I've recently taken a deep dive into coming up with ways of doing this. We're gonna look at several different ways of doing this. So the first thing I'm gonna talk about is using clips in session view to kind of generate some patterns, some weird kind of glitchy drum break type stuff. So we're going to do that in the first example by using follow actions. Now, I'm not going to go super deep into follow actions. A lot of what I'm trying to talk about here is kind of like, broad strokes, general concepts sort of stuff. But you can find a lot of information on how to use follow actions, online pretty easily, other YouTube videos and whatnot. What I'd like to take a look at here is I've grabbed some break beats. And this is stuff that just comes with, the Ableton content. So if you have Suite, which I recommend, all my videos are really intended for like if you have Suite, So if you download a lot of the content, you'll find, there's packs of breaks and stuff like that. So I've grabbed several of these things and tossed them all in on a track here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of set these to randomly jump around back and forth between all of them and see what that kind of gives us. So here's a quick tip. If you select all of them, you'll be able to change their settings together. So basically in this launch mode is where you're going to find the different modes for using the follow actions. And again, you can look at the manual to find out a lot more information about this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up so in a way where it'll play one of these clips and then go to any other. Right, so any would be including itself, but other is basically just go to any other clip except itself. And the way I have it set up right now is every 2/16 notes, which is an eighth note, it's going to change and go to another one. And it's going to play in legato mode, so it's going to keep them. It's almost as if it keeps them in time. So if you imagine I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 or so drum beats here, and it's almost like if all 6 of them are playing at once. And it just flipped from one to the other, so it stayed kind of in time, right? So the snare keeps landing on the 2 and 4, that kind of thing. If I don't have legato mode on, it's just going to start at the top of every one of those. So it's kind of going to be like, in most of the drum beats, you're going to start with kick, so it'll be like kick, 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 kick. So I have legato mode on. There's a variety of other trigger modes. Quantization global just keeps it in time with the whole global quantization, which right now is currently set to quarter. And there's a whole variety of other things here. You can actually have it like set up for like, chances of doing, one different, mode or another. But I'm just going to stick to this one. Again, you can look in the manual for some more deeper information on this. So basically, I'm going to take one of these drum breaks. They're basically like this. Loaded a bunch of them in, and I'm gonna randomize basically their playback. So let's just check that out real quick. That's pretty cool. But these guys' original BPM is a little bit higher than that. So let's just kick it up to like 130 or so. Right, so we're getting a pretty good juggle going on. Now, it's usually best if you have something, say like maybe another beat going along with it. So let's try that. All right, so it's sounding a little bit more reasonable. Another thing we can do, if you look back at the video where I talked about the different clip automation and modulations you can do, this gets a lot more interesting when you start digging into that. So if we have a look at our envelopes and we start adjusting a variety of things, you can check that video for a couple quick tips on that. You can also, maybe one of these you could turn around backwards, where you could start pitching a couple of them differently to get even more like bizarre random effects. But this plus all the clip automation can really give you some wacky stuff. And the best way to deal with this, by the way, is to create another track. As you see here, I have one called FA Capture that we're actually monitoring through currently. Right? And the best thing to do is really to kind of record it. And that way you can kind of take the results you get. They're a little bit random and crazy. I'm going to undo that because I don't even really want that, but a little bit random and crazy, and be able to pick through, like everything you've done and be like, okay, you're probably going to get a lot of nonsense, but you might get some really cool stuff in there. And then you can kind of like hand select what you like and what you don't like. And you can even change some of the settings while this is going as well, you know? If you have a plugin on it or something, you know, you could modify that, you know, take it even further with a beat repeat or whatever. But that's the basic idea. You can get some really cool stuff this way. So speaking of things like beat repeat, we can have a look at that real quick. There's several things that can kind of get like an auto mangle type effect. Beat repeat is one of them. There's a Max for Live device called Buffer Shuffler. There's probably a lot more Max for Live devices that'll mangle things in certain ways. You know, I mean, you could pretty much use this same concept for even like granular delay or whatever you know you want in general. You know, for example, you could load a plugin on a track with a drum beat. So here we have one. Slap something like beat repeater on it. So I got a little setup dialed in here. You can tweak away like crazy. You know, that's one okay way. It's not really my favorite way of doing it. It's a little like, it always kind of sounds like beat repeat, really, you know. The best way to deal with something like this or buffer shuffler or anything else that kind of auto mangles your stuff is, again, like I did in the last example, create a capture track and record onto it. And then, so that way you can go back and just, you're probably going to get a lot of stuff that's like so-so. In pretty much all the examples I'm going to show you today, you're probably going to get a lot of stuff that's like, and moments of like coolness. And you can go back and like kind of edit that out, like, and then just take the bits you want and put them where you want. The same goes for something like Granulator, which I also did mention in a video earlier. You can take maybe this exact same drum loop right here that I've got here, drop it directly into the Granulator and kind of go a little nuts with it. Mangle it. It doesn't sound very awesome at first. You get some interesting sounds in there. And it's all generated from the same drum loop. And then again, record that onto a capture track and go through it and slice all the little pieces you want out of it. Because if you do the right movements, I'm using a controller with this right now. I'm using my push, so I'm changing the grain size and the file position on the fly. But you could automate that with, you know, automation, whatever, you know, you can kind of like do it by hand and then go back and take the best bits and then drop it in, you know, end of 8 bars, have a little mangling come in and, you know, whatever it is, instead of a drum, you know, fill, because we're using drum loops, right? So you can do some stuff like that. So that's my advice for any plugin, like kind of auto mangling type of thing. So here's something I did recently with some drum loops. So in this case, some extra percussion stuff, so tambourines and shakers. What I did is I created myself a rack here that has loops loaded in it already, and they all loaded in simpler. So I have a variety of different tambourines and I have a variety of different shakers. Let's check this out. All right, so what this allows me to do is, this is all within a drum rack, by the way. This allows me to keep the shakers and tambourines in time. So if I lower the tempo, let's go to 101. It's going to stay in time. So they're all in simplers and they're all warped. And also what I have is a chain selector set up so I can scroll through the different tambourine samples that I have. And they're all in time. Same thing with my shakers, no matter what tempo I'm at. So the way I did this is I took a track, loaded simpler on it, there's nothing on it. Find myself some sort of drum loop that I like. Let's see what this one is. Standard old shaker. me quantize it all. Control A, Control U. Now I have a tight shaker, right? I go to my simpler. I'm going to drag that quantized file right into it. Now if you see here, it's no longer starting at the very beginning of the file. It's starting to wherever it is, the first point. I quantized it, so it's not exactly the same, right? So I'm going to turn it on warp. I'm going to turn it on loop. And now I've got myself a shaker that will change with the tempo. All right? So I can take all my favorite bits and I can throw them in a drum rack like this, and they'll remain that way. So, also what I did is in that drum rack, I've created a group, and by making new chains, I drag a whole bunch of different tambourines or drum beats into here, right? And by using the chain selector, I can set it up so I can like have control over which tambourine it is that's playing, right? So if you change these regions right here, each one of these gets a region. The chain selector controls this knob, and here it is right here in action. So I can change which tambourine it is that I want, and all of them are in time. So that could be a kick and snare pattern, that could be just kick patterns. You could have a bank of, just kicks, just snares. You could have, whole drum loops, whatever it is, and everything stays in time, and you can kind of go through, put some real basic MIDI, just put like, one big long note like C or something, put that in there, and you can scroll through and change patterns and everything remains in time. So you can kind of have like an auto beat generator sort of, but it's made out of your own samples. So it's not like some plug-in that somebody else has that you're using, somebody else's predetermined patterns, you're making your own. So you can really get creative with that, So it's something that I'm going to dig deeper into. I kind of only used it for auxiliary percussion, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to start creating these things with different patterns and only pieces of patterns, and then just seeing how I can put things together. Because honestly, turning a knob, you get quicker results than going through and like grabbing a file and editing it and cutting it up and dropping it into place and moving it around, so you can really get some interesting things happening that way. So here's the final piece that I'm going to talk about here. What I've made is something just like what I made in my previous video when I beat sliced something to in this case maybe like a like eighth note division, but as opposed to slicing by transient, right? So watch my last video for that. I show exactly how you do that. So I've taken that exact same idea here, and I've put it on a track with an arpeggiator in a rack, and I'm able to kind of play it. I'm gonna use my push here and press like a few different notes. I'm gonna press 4 at once. And I'm going to change which 4 notes I'm pressing, and I can vary the beat. Because basically what's happening, I'm doing this a little bit fancy, so I'm going to kind of undo my fanciness here, is I'm basically triggering one note at a time, but the arpeggiator is going to play it out if I hold down more than one note at a time. So for example, one note, I'm going to hold down 2 notes. I'm going to hold down 3, right? So the arpeggiator is going to keep this thing playing in time. In this case, I have the arpeggiator set to 16th notes, but the beat is divided by eighths. We'll listen to what eighths are like. So this would be eighths at 101. I can kind of have some fun with the arpeggiator here. I go up to 16s. There's a little bit of beat repeat stuff in here as well that you can mess with, but I'm going to show you this as well. Steps. If I put steps up to 1, it's going to play out another step. And if I put distance up to 1, it's going to play out another step, transposed up a step. So if I only hit one note, it's actually going to give me 2. So it's going to be 1, and the second one is going to be chromatically up 1 step, which triggers the next step. All right? So I can get some extra stuff out of this. But be warned. If you go too high, it's just going to repeat that one. So, anyways, this is a really fun thing to do. I recently used this exact patch with a live drummer and was basically doing beat manglings on top of him playing a straight beat, and it was really, really, really fun to do. You can take this whole idea quite a bit further, actually. So, right now I have this Well, yeah, right now I have this set up with a variety of other copies of this exact same drum beat with a variety of other effects hooked up to it. So like obviously a delay and whatnot, a second ARP, which makes it just play back faster, pitch LFO, which is going to change the pitch of the beat. So what I can do here, again, using chain selector to select which one of these is playing at any given time, I'm able to kind of go through and do some really kind of interesting stuff here. You know, and get creative with it. So that's a little bit tame actually, but you can get it pretty wild. So when I started to kind of think of like, you know, how to do beat mangling like this, once I started playing with the, slicing to beat division and putting in a sampler and retriggering with an arpeggiator, I started to look to see who else was doing this kind of stuff and what other kind of advice I could find. And I found a great video. If you like this type of stuff but want to take it like way further, you should check out the videos made by Ned Rush, because he really walks through piece by piece of like how he sets these up and makes them really, really wild. And it gets out there. The stuff just mangling like crazy and like a whole nother dimension. So I was shooting for something a little bit more tame and usable for what I do. But you should definitely check out his videos because it gets really, really, really nuts. So that kind of concludes the different ways in which I've found to play with drum loops in Ableton. And I think I've covered like everything I could think of. I've really taken a big deep dive during the coronavirus lockdown. And explored a whole bunch of different stuff. My advice to you is, of everything I've covered, usually the best thing to do is a little bit of all those things, or a lot of those things, So not a whole lot of one of those. Just like bits and sprinkles wherever you need to, and and like really get creative with it and find your favorite things, and incorporate multiple methods, and it's a lot of fun. All right, great. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you next time.